I grew up in Hampshire in a town called Winchester. I'm not a natural academic at all. It's something which I've always struggled with, but I've always been really, really good at understanding the bigger picture and how things fit together. I was quite good at school at things like geography. And actually the whole geography thing is where my sort of first interest in sustainability developed. I ended up taking a role within a housing association. I didn't think that that would be where I would end up, but I felt it was a really useful route. Part of that was to look at the reduction of carbon, how we were going to transition our properties. Then I came out of that going, right, this is an area that I want to move into. And someone I know said, the West of England Combined Authority are looking to develop an organisation that really drives Retrofit. Would you be interested in being the managing director of that? I took a deep breath and went, yeah, I'll give it a go. And I can easily say it's the best job I've ever had. Retrofit involves three main things. Creating a low carbon heat source, an air source heat pump, ground source heat pump, something like that. A way of generating power to run that home. And then thirdly, it's a way of containing the heat and the energy that you've created for that home through insulation. What we're trying to do at Retrofit West is to simplify that and make it easier for people to understand the process they've got to go through.
Simplification, at least in my experience, is a very complicated process.
Yeah.
From a user experience design perspective on your part, how does simplifying the process look? Hello, and welcome back to CleanTalk, the podcast shining a spotlight on inspiring companies and professionals across the world of renewable energy and clean technology. Today, we're back in Bristol. In fact, I'm starting to think, goodness knows how many episodes we've done here. It feels like we could run CleanTalk without leaving Bristol at this point. Today, I'm here with Retrofit West, and we're going to be finding out what their organisation does, the impact it's having on the community, and just look at the wider plans and impact that they're going to have in the coming years in this city. Joining me today is Simon Andrews. Simon, welcome.
Nice to meet you. Hi.
Simon, we start off with a bit about our guest, find out where they came from, what their background is. Can you give me a bit of a picture of your upbringing, your childhood?
Yeah, sure. So I didn't grow up in Bristol. Like a lot of people, I came to university here and stayed. It is one of the greatest cities in the world as far as I'm concerned. I grew up in Hampshire in a town called Winchester. Went to a local comprehensive school down there and did reasonably well. Really enjoyed it. My dad was a chartered surveyor and my mum was a registered nurse. Yeah, and then came to university here in Bristol, and then that's sort of how I ended up in this path, really.
Amazing. What did you study?
So my first degree was business studies, which I then converted into an MBA at University of West of England.
What was the MBA experience like?
Really, really hard. I'm not a natural academic at all.
Okay.
It's something which I've always struggled with, but I kind of recognised it was something that I needed to do kind of to get where I wanted to be in life. I was always interested in the sort of theory and strategies, but the whole writing and developing and doing that whole presenting your ideas thing was always a challenge for me. That's not my bag at all.
When people are like astute about what they're not good at, they're normally also astute about what they are good at. Are there any ways that you learn or present well that you've sort of identified early on?
Yeah, so I've always been really, really good at sort of understanding particularly the bigger picture and how things fit together. From a very, very young age, the whole sort of strategy and sort of how different subjects sort of interface was always something that really interested me. I was quite good at school at things like geography and later on economics and stuff like that, because it started to bring in other disciplines, and that's kind of where my thinking sort of started to develop. And actually the whole geography thing is where my sort of first interest in sustainability and the impact on climate change and that sort of thing sort of developed. I ended up doing geography A level when everyone else was doing their GCSEs at school.
Wow.
There was a small group of us that did that within my school, and my geography teacher at the time, it was when the whole CFC thing was starting to happen, so the global warming and the hole in the ozone layer and stuff like that was starting to become a thing. So what's that, probably mid-80s time.
Okay.
And that's kind of, I got really interested at that point, what we could do and where we could end up. I didn't end up following it at university, but it definitely was something that I was interested in. I didn't do particularly well in that A level, by the way. And it sounds great, but it wasn't something that I focused more on my GCSEs when I did them at that time.
You finish your MBA. What's next on your career journey?
I went out and did first jobs, really. So when I left uni, I worked in recruitment. I'd say I was attracted by the opportunity to earn more money. I didn't have the sort of debts that students these days have, because it wasn't a thing, but it was definitely motivation at that particular point in time to sort of earn that. And I did that for 5 to 6 years. before I realised that I needed to be something else. I needed something more to my career to keep me motivated during the day, and that's when I decided to go back to uni and retrain at that point.
What kind of inspired that change of course? We spoke to a guy called Will Hitchcock who runs a solar surveying company, and he had a similar thing of he found a corporate ladder to climb, should we say, or a path to go into that the prospects career-wise were good.
Yeah.
But then he got to a point where he was like, I want to do something more fulfilling. Can you kind of unpack that a bit more for me?
Yeah, I mean, it very similar mindset actually to where I was. Recruitment is and was rewarding financially, but it really felt like I was doing the same thing consistently every day. There wasn't any much variety to it, and I was starting to get pretty bored. But I was finding it quite stifling because you get used to a certain lifestyle with the income. So then to reset that was a really difficult decision. So I ended up staying with it for longer than I probably should have done for my mental health and kind of where I needed to be because I wasn't getting that stimulation. But it got to a point where I went, right, I really need to find something which sparks my interest. And at the time, the recruitment industry that I was working in was to do with construction. So we would recruit teams of people to do certain big projects. We were heavily involved in the Hong Kong airport and the big development of Bangkok airport in terms of making sure that it was the right engineers. We were doing recruiting into that, which was really interesting. But yeah, I needed something more. So I actually ended up speaking randomly to somebody who I had known at university who was a lecturer at there. And actually my first course that I did for the business studies, I had provisionally got a place doing building studies at the university. But I changed at the last minute to go down the business. And when I bumped into this guy, literally in a pub in Bristol, I was talking about frustrations and kind of thinking, I wish I'd kind of actually stayed with my original thoughts and gone down something which is a little bit more principled in terms of stuff. And he said, oh, actually, we're just starting this new course, which is a postgrad in building surveying. And it really sparked an interest. And that sort of thought stayed in the back of my head for 18 months while I was still going through this. Oh, I need to change something. I need to move. And then eventually I went, actually, let's be proactive about this. And I sent an email off and applied for the course back at UWE again, going back in as an adult, much more of a mature student with the right sort of mindset. And they gave me a spot. So I then did that for 18 months, which was building surveying. Very much focused on going down the RACS route, become a chartered surveyor, and then sort of had to decide what discipline I was going to do within surveying.
Obviously, when you go to uni the first time round, I guess if you want to call it networking, it's a lot more just focused on making friends and building personal relationships. Did you have an intentional approach to building relationships in this sort of return to education? Did you think, right, I can go to this place, there's going to be like-minded people there, let's establish some connections that might come in handy later on?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree. I mean, there was lots of us there. It was a relatively pioneering course at the time because it was a real fast tracking people through that sort of stuff. So there were a lot of people with that sort of, right, I want to do something very different. There was lots of people that were inspired by the whole grand design thing at the time. They wanted to go and do their own thing and property developing and that sort of stuff. But we were also, as a cohort within the course, really exposed to lots of different routes that you could take. So there was the professional organisations, the sort of the consultancy firms, the bigger organisations like WS Atkins and the larger sort of VARP type organisations. And they were often part of the course. They'd be delivering course elements. So you'd get to network them as well, professionally, as well as with your peers within the course. So everybody took advantage of the fact that it was definitely designed to kind of create that. I'm still in touch with a couple of people from that course, but people spread and scatter, and that was a few years ago now. So they're all doing things. But I think everybody's generally stayed within the industry from that.
What was your impression in that course of the Arabs and of those larger consultancies and companies? Because I often find when I'm learning about an industry, I'm trying to map out a supply chain or something like that, and learn about how different businesses work. I get overly hooked on different people that are doing that well. Arab being a good example, like they've built an empire, if you will, in that space. Did you geek out on that sort of detail?
Yeah, I was hugely impressed by those sort of organisations. That in my mind was where I wanted to be.
Okay.
Working in that sort of environment. At the time, I saw it as a real point of success if you could end up in those sort of places. I was 30-ish when I was doing that sort of thing. So I was still kind of impressed by that sort of thing at that particular point in time. And absolutely, they are incredible organizations, and they really are free thinkers and real drivers for the right way of developing. So it was something that I was interested in. And then sort of being exposed to the smaller consultancy firms as well, I was generally thinking, oh, that's really interesting. That's generally what I wanted to do. But I didn't know the detail at that time of what an actual 9 to 5 job would involve with working in those organizations. It just looked great.
Okay.
And that's where actually my next big decision point came from, I think, for my career.
So the next big decision point, the next big milestone, what was this?
As we were coming towards the end of the course, you had an opportunity to do work experience, and generally you'd focus on some of the organizations that you thought you'd go into. And there is and there still is a shortage of people going through university and doing sort of those professional construction roles. The whole construction industry across every level is unrepresented, and there needs more people need to go into it. But particularly in those areas, they were really looking to try to get people from these courses to move into them. So I did some work experience with a consultancy firm, and went in with the sort of bright-eyed and this is going to be really interesting. And I spent 2 or 3 weeks, moving into months, doing dilapidation surveys and looking at sort of property. And that's typically what you would do is if you were starting in that industry, you'd start to understand how the leases and legal positions finishes at the end of contracts, and how you as a professional would help an organization manage their risk. I found it utterly boring. I really, really struggled with it. And I had some real moments of going, what have I done? I've moved from a industry that I was getting paid quite well into, spent 2 years of my life retraining. The course was expensive. It was something I had to save up for and pay for. And yet the first exposure was, oh, this really is something that I'm not that interested in. And is this a big error? So I had to have a real rethink about what I wanted to do at that stage. And I ended up moving to client side. I then realized that I wanted to be part of an organization that managed and looked after large property portfolios. And you're looking at it from the other side. So you're not delivering services into those organizations. You're the in-house expert who helps guide the organization and then employs those organizations to help you. And that's where I ended up.
You'd had a season of making some substantial career change before that. How did this compare in terms of the length of transition and also the intensity of that? Because it said it took you like 18 months or so in the first career transition to make that move after deciding something isn't right here. What was the second one like?
Oh, much, much faster. By that point, I'd learned that follow your gut. It absolutely really is important that if something doesn't feel right, it's not going to change. You need to move and transition and make that change very quickly. So I then applied to a number of organizations, and then slightly strangely for me at the time, I ended up taking a role within a housing association. And I didn't think that would be the way where I would end up, but I felt it was a really useful route for me to then start to work in that environment of sort of larger scale property portfolio management.
What was that like?
Really, really interesting. And that's what hooked me in. And I was very lucky, as with many people, right place at the right time. I joined an organization who were literally within 2 months of me joining them, announced that they were merging with a much, much larger housing association.
Wow.
There was a period of time where there was a lot of that going on within the industry. Because of that, my direct boss didn't want to go through that transition. He was a director of property. He left. An organization is not that attractive to people coming to potentially get a job if they're about to go through a major change process.
Sure.
So the chief exec of the organization I was working with said to me, look, I know you're relatively new to this industry, but you have maturity and you've been working, out of uni for a few years doing the whole recruitment thing. Would you be interested in applying for your old boss's job? Slightly panicked. I said, yeah, okay, I'll give it a go, but I won't really know what I'm doing. And just jumped in basically with 2 feet just to kind of see where I was going to go from that
Wow.
point onwards, really. And it was really interesting. The learning curve was very, very steep. I was working with people that have been in the industry for a long time, particularly managing the whole merger position and how the property interface would work. But we kept the wheels on for the organization in terms of the property and the services that we had to deliver. And then got to the point where the merger happened, and then we were then part of a much larger group. And then that was where the next big opportunity came from me. The company that we were merging with were very large, and they needed somebody that really knew the existing systems of the joining organization to help interface all the asset management property services stuff. So they said, would you like to do it? And I said, yes. One of the hardest sort of 2-3 year period of my life, I ended up doing that job. We interfaced our organization. And because I had experience of doing that, the wider group that was 60,000 houses said, right, we need to collapse our group structure and we need to do exactly what you've done for the first organization that you were working with to all the other ones. And there was about 25 separate organizations that existed under the umbrella of this larger one. And we had to collapse all those to make sure they were all working in the same way so we could compare and contrast performance and be able to report up to a board and governance level about how that portfolio was performing. And you're not comparing apples and pears. Everyone has the same metrics that you're working towards,
Sure.
and the same sort of structure and same sort of assessment that you're doing. It allowed the organization to then leverage the assets that they had in that organization to be able to generate more funding,
Sure.
which is really important with that sort of portfolio management and housing associations, because they need to develop new properties. That's part of their remit. And without the ability to generate more finance, you can't fund new build.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I did. So I ended up doing that for quite a period of time, and it was a brilliant job. I loved it. I was all over the country. I had a hotel in Liverpool, which was their main office was, that I'd stay in once a week, and I stayed there for 4 years. Not once a week, not every day for 4 years, but once a week I'd be up there for one day, and then for the rest of the week I'd be down in London or up in Scotland or over in Yorkshire, and it was really fascinating to kind of do that sort of job.
We're here today with you representing Retrofit West. Can you bridge the gap and introduce us to that stage of your career?
The last housing association role I had, I was director of property for them, and part of that was to look at how we were going to transition our properties into the greening that we needed to do,
Yeah.
the reduction of carbon. I was working in Wales at the time, and Wales are ahead of England in terms of their development of how they're going to do that. It's something that they're very proud of, quite rightly so. But because of that, I was heavily involved in the development and the thinking around developing strategies for how the country, but also all the associations that existed within the country, would move their stock on. And that really sparked an interest in that particular technical field for me. So I started to find out about it. It's a relatively new ideas coming through, how you do that to scale. It was a pivot point, but it was something that was of interest to me. Then the pandemic hit, and we all had to work our way through that. And, everyone had a terrible time, some more than others. But then I came out of that going, right, this is an area that I want to move into. And again, I got a phone call from someone that I used to work with saying, I know you were interested in this field. There is something coming up in Bristol. The West of England Combined Authority are looking to develop an organisation that really drives retrofit in the able to pay market. Would you be interested in being the managing director of that? And again, took a deep breath and went, yeah, I'll give it a go and see what that pans out. Fully expecting it not to be that interesting. Then I had an interview, sat down and discussed it with the director of environment for the West of England, and went, actually, this is really interesting. This is actually what I really want to do. So I accepted the job, and we've been going now for 18 months, and I can quite easily say that it's the best job I've ever had. Absolutely love it. Really good.
Amazing. What is retrofitting? What does it involve? And could you give us a bit more of a broader picture on, so the organisation, was it the local council, did you say?
So the West of England Combined Mayoral Authority is an organisation that delivers core strategic services and requirements for the area that it covers. So it covers Bristol, Bath, South Gloucestershire and North East Somerset. It has strategic overview of certain things, and the idea behind it is that it utilises the sort of combined might of those areas to provide singular benefits to all of them. So particularly in this area, you have Bristol, Bath, South Gloucestershire. Obviously, it's a larger thing. It would be very easy for Bristol to suck up all the resources, but by combining them, it leverages the benefit for all the areas and all the cities within that point. Same exists for London. You have the London Mayoral Combined Authority, and in Manchester as well, and and East Midlands, which sits around Birmingham. They exist around the whole country, but they're there to deliver key things. So they focus on environment, strategies, transport, things like that.
Did you get involved in establishing the company? Were you just managing a brief they'd already come up with for what it was going to do?
We knew what we were going to do already. That had already been established. So we are officially a CIC, which is a community interest company. And it was established by the Centre for Sustainable Energy, working with key stakeholders within the region. Coming out the back of COVID, the Centre for Sustainable Energy took part in a whole bunch of stakeholder engagement events and asked a very key question to everybody that was there. What is stopping us from doing the really worthy work that we do on individual projects and scaling it?
Right.
Making it happen sort of at a larger volume and ensuring that it's not just individual projects. And what came out from those workshops was a really clear view that there wasn't one organisation that everybody could get behind and could really focus on this particular challenge. Retrofit is actually quite a tricky word in that it's not very known by the consumers and homeowners that would have to do it. Retrofitting is upgrading your home to make it more energy efficient. Retrofit as a word is something the industry has grabbed hold of, but it isn't necessarily known. So we needed to find ways to actually really push that agenda to make more people see it as a viable thing for them to do to their homes, because we all need to do that. 30% of our emissions come from the heating and using of our homes. So if we don't deal with how we manage and deal with our heating and our use of our housing, we won't hit our climate targets. So it's a very important thing that we need to be pushing.
What does retrofitting encompass when you do it on a house?
Typically, it involves three main things. Creating a low carbon heat source. Typically, that would be an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump or something like that. It would be a way of generating power to run that home. And again, typically that would be PV panels, photovoltaics, that people can have on their roofs, or wind turbines or any other type of thing like that. And then thirdly, it's a way of containing the heat and the energy that you've created for that home through insulation. Now, there is a lot more technicality to it than that, but what we're trying to do at Retrofit West is to simplify that and make it easier for people to understand the process they've got to go through.
That covers a lot of different specialist fields, what you just described. You've got solar panels and the installation of them. You've got heat management, all sorts of different things and different aspects. How do you as Retrofit West bring together the skill sets and the technicalities to deliver services and advice in this area?
The challenge exists on a number of different levels. A lot of people don't know that they need to do it to their home. They don't know and are unsure of the benefits. There is an awful lot of misinformation out there about how that needs to be done. So all of that stops consumers making a decision to actually invest in this stuff. On the other side, on the supply chain side, the construction industry is also at capacity. You know, they are everyone is very, very busy. So they're looking at this market and going, well, I can see it's going to be a potential benefit for me. You know, it could be an income for me and my business, but I'm already busy. So why do I need to retrain? And that would involve lost time through training and potential costs that they would have to do with courses. So again, that's a barrier for them to make the decision to move into the market, because, you know, why, and I totally understand it. Why would you make that active decision to do something where there is a potential risk when you have got a great job at the moment with regular income and something that you know? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to overcome those dual burdens of uncertainty on both sides of the market. And we're doing that through a number of ways. We're trying to simplify the process that a homeowner can take to understand what their house can do, can achieve, and the benefits that they would experience in money saving. And that's absolutely true that most homes, through doing very simple retrofit measures, will save money over the long term. And it's just about giving them confidence to make that decision. And on the supply chain side, we're trying to show them through training, provision, and working with supply chain that there is a market there and it's something that they can move towards with confidence.
Have you got any case studies of any homeowners that you've engaged with, and maybe just kind of unpack some of the challenges you've faced in delivering your services, but the success that it has brought to homeowners?
We're really focused on trying to move the decision making beyond, as I said, the people doing very worthy early adopter type projects to trying to mainstream it a bit more, trying to get more volume into the market. So we have lots of case studies of people that we've worked with who have taken a journey. Some of those journeys have been established for years. The more recent examples are ones which are following our sort of more prescribed route, which is where typically someone will be interested in it, and the cost of living crisis has helped us in that respect, because people are now looking at their energy bills and going,
Yeah.
this is a problem. We are actually getting people now coming through that don't just care about the climate. They're doing it because there's an economic reason for them to do so.
Sure.
Typically what we will do with people is that they will be interested in it. As I said, they'll either be looking at their bills in horror, or they'll be wanting to do something more with their home because they realize it's the right thing to do. And people will phone us up. We have a advice line which provides basic or actually very technically detailed answers to people's query. We have a number of different individuals that help man that, and we can provide information to people to be able to make the right decision at that point in time, or learn more. And it's typically the learning more stage that we're trying to move people along with.
Yeah.
What we do then is we then encourage people to have an assessment of their home, and that will then allow them to really understand how they use their property and how their property performs and what they could do to reach the benefits that they want to achieve. And that can start as simple as draft proofing, or the much more detailed stuff that requires a really understanding of how the building forms, to make air source heat pump assessments, for example, or PV panels, or looking at different insulation type choices.
How does it work from a financial perspective? Of, say I'm a homeowner, I've identified that, the cost of my bills are going up.
Yeah.
I know that there's areas of my housekeeping that could be better to retain more heat, and all sorts of other things. I've discovered Retrofit West. What does it look like in terms of, I call you up, am I paying for the phone call? Like, how does that work?
So in terms of the cost of engagement with us,
Yeah.
the advice is completely free. That's where the funding from the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority really helps.
Right.
It allows us to be able to provide that service to the population of the area, and it's becoming very useful. We're finding that a lot of consumers will do a lot of research online first, and we have a lot of information on our website that we've developed, which gives them a real insight as to what they could do. Then they'll speak to us again. This is all free. We then subsidise the assessment. It's important that people and homeowners have a bit of skin in the game, because if it's free, they often don't move on.
Okay.
They'll just take the service and just go, okay, I know now, and then sit on it.
Not much commitment.
There's not much commitment. So there is often a small cost. That doesn't come to us. We don't make any profit at all. We're a community interest company. We're here for the benefit of the local area. But what we're trying to do is encourage the wider market. So we engage and work with assessment providers that work locally, who are profit making. There's nothing wrong with that. So we help subsidise the cost of their service to homeowners, so people can understand how their property performs. But typically, an assessment would cost the homeowner roughly about £100 with our discount. So that's often very achievable for people to do, and we're encouraging, and we're getting more and more take up of that service as time goes on.
Excellent. What's the next steps? Say, obviously, depending on what the survey has assessed, but what's the typical outcome?
So what we're really trying to do now is encourage our customers to really work with us at that next stage. And we've got a group of people who will sit down with them and really work out what their next steps are going to be. And it can be done over the phone, or it can be done face to face. And what we're really trying to do is establish that trust with people. And this is, going back to my previous answers when we talked about this. This is the real important part of the service that we can deliver. Consumers are unsure about this, and retrofit investment, it's not cheap. What you need to be doing to your home potentially could be thousands of pounds. So it's appropriate for them to get the right advice and to be take that, and we will take those people through that journey. So typically, someone may say, "Okay, I'm looking at my home. My energy bills are £2,500 a year across gas and electricity. What can I do with that?" And we'd be looking at, okay, so how old's your gas boiler? When's is that going to change? How does your property orientate in terms of the sun? And then making decisions with them based on where they are within their current use. We have to be pragmatic about that. That's really important for our message. If someone has just put a gas boiler in, it would be slightly remiss of us if money's tight, or us to suggest that we should be replacing that with an air source heat pump,
Sure.
because they've just spent 4 or 5 grand on a heating system.
Yep.
So, but we could look at other things that they could benefit from. But if their boiler was coming to the end of its life, which typically on a combi boiler is about 15 years, then they should be really thinking about putting an air source heat pump in, and we can really help them with that process to ensure they get the right installer, the right design done, so it actually gives them a benefit. And people, if they get it right, if the design is done correctly and the installation is done correctly, they will save money. Absolutely, 100%.
What is the end goal of an advisory organisation like yourselves to have on the wider supply chain? You've got technical organisations you're working with, you're subsidising some of their service work. Something that I've seen or heard about in the solar installation industry is that there was a period, probably still happens to some degree, but early on, where highly technical people would go in and advise that somebody needed solar panels and this would be the offering and this would help their sort of household needs. And then there wasn't much ongoing support. And, now sometimes you'll find people that have solar panels installed. They won't really know what the conditions like or how much money it's saving them. Having an organisation like yours, which is supposed to be, I guess, that sort of interface for communities to gain access to this knowledge, but have someone in the middle they can trust telling them this is what you actually need. What does the future look like? Is there a point when you can step back from that and the technical service providers have become better as a result? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. We joke, slightly tongue in cheek, because we've all got mortgages to pay, etc., that our end goal is to try and make ourselves redundant. So if we can get to a position where we don't need to exist, then we've won, right? That is where we've got to be. Now, that's not going to happen in the next 5 years. It's not going to happen in the next 10 years. But if we do what we do well, we will get as much quality into the market where we as a service aren't required, and it will become normalized what we're trying to do. The problem is at the moment, we are still in that very early curve of trying to make this the normal, the new normal.
Yeah.
And it's not yet. If you go around Europe, and I was very lucky this summer to be able to do a big road trip with my family, when we were driving back up through Germany, Belgium, and France, even though they still have ambitious emission targets in those countries, retrofit is ubiquitous in that area. You see it everywhere, particularly in Belgium. There is an awful lot of it happening in those countries, much more than it does in the UK. And our aim is to get to that point where, if your boiler breaks down at home now, that you can phone up your friendly local plumber and he'll be able to come and sort the problem out for you generally. We need to get to that place that the people can do exactly the same thing. Got a problem with my PV panels. Got a problem with my air source heat pump. How can I get it fixed? Oh, that's John down the road. That's Lisa. She can sort that out for you. It's that sort of thing that we need to be encouraging, and the normalizing of it in the industry. We would love to get to a position where consumers don't need an organisation like us.
Okay, yeah.
Ideally, they will be able to go out there into the market and get a quality installer who will design it properly, and it will be done within a couple of months. At the moment, the waiting list for a good air source heat pump design and installation is 6 months to a year.
Okay.
You can get it done quicker, but you've got to be asking yourself questions at that point. You need to ensure that the quality is there, because that's absolutely what we need to achieve. We need to achieve an upward spiral of quality, which will allow people to say and become evangelical about the systems that they've got. This works. I'm saving money. I'll tell everybody, rather than this doesn't work. I'll tell even more people. And then more uncertainty comes into the market. We're trying to change that mindset.
Going back to the case studies, what's the impact been in your evangelism so far? Have you created brand advocates successfully?
Yes. So generally, people that engage with us and go through the process are very, very happy with what they've achieved at the end. People are saving money. I don't excuse this. That is the number one decision point that people make. Is this going to cost me money or not? Even if they really are keen on achieving a carbon goal, they still don't want to be hampered by higher costs. So we have to answer that question, and they are. A well installed air source heat pump with PV panels and good insulation, guaranteed you will save money on your energy bills. And our customers are starting to see that now. And it's really important we capture that, because those people, particularly early adopters, they do tend to be people that want to talk to people about it. But what we really see is that if people do it within their home, particularly in cities like Bristol, Bath, and the sort of communities that exist in South Gloucestershire, there is real local interest in that, and it's that leverage that we can really help, that can really help the end goal, because people will trust their neighbour.
Yeah.
They won't necessarily trust the person down the pub, and they'll hear the negative press about certain things, and that's enough to put a seed of doubt into them. But if the people at number 12 have had a successful install, they will talk about it.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that then will phone us up and say, okay, you've really helped these people.
Hmm.
Can you come and do a similar thing to us? Is growing. And we're starting from a very low bar. Don't get me wrong. We haven't got thousands of people knocking down our door, but what we are starting to see is successful journeys and happy customers.
If we were to quantify the time span between an initial engagement with Retrofit West and, oh my goodness, my house feels like a home again,
Right.
what's the timeline on average?
It varies hugely, and this is a really important point to what we're trying to achieve. We really try to push the pragmatism and really try to understand the challenges that people have. This is people's homes. You know, Retrofit can be very disruptive if you want to go the absolute whole hog. If you're really, really getting into sealing every single potential draft and dealing with insulating and then dealing with the ventilation that has to come with that, and that's very important. It can be quite invasive. So we need to really understand people. And that's why we don't have a set timescale. But if people are motivated, they can get this stuff done within 3 months. If they want to take a much longer approach, it can take years. And that's okay. As long as people start their journey, that's the important thing. It's about knowledge and understanding, and people really starting to get what they need to do, and realizing that it won't cost them money long term. Typically, if you look at an air source heat pump, for example, the investment required at the start is relatively large, but over a 8-year to 10-year period, you'll be saving money month on month, including the running and paying back of that system. And then when you get to the point where you've paid off your system, you're really saving money, and it makes a really big difference. We're talking, so using my house as an example, £2,500 energy bills a year. I can get that down to about £500
Wow.
if I needed to, without doing anything majorly invasive. If I wanted to go down the really, really invasive stuff, I can get that down to hundreds, but that would require more work.
How much data and insight do you have on the demographic information about the Bristol community? My guess would be if there are a lot more like rental properties or students, then there'll be less people at the life stage to be invested in the building they're living in as much. How have you, I guess, navigated the different demographic groups around Bristol?
That's a hugely important part of the work we do. We do try to target certain segments of the population, and we use marketing data to achieve that. We have set personas of people that we identify, because you're absolutely right. Where people are at different stages of their life, they're more likely to consider it. So typically people that are maybe becoming to the end of their careers, they've realizing they're staying within the family home for longer, they've got more disposable income because they've paid off their mortgages. They're a really strong part of our drive. Or the other side of that, you get people that are buying their first or second home. They may have a new young family. They've just got their kids into the first primary school. They know they're going to be there for the next 7 or 8 years minimum. They're not going to make that change. They get more comfortable about that. But that's not all part of the picture, because what we are seeing now within the data is that retrofit in homes, there is a positive value there, and people will be that will be recognised in the value of their home. So they can do an investment within their property, and they will realise that when they come to resell it, because people are starting to see and want that. In the same way that they want a nice kitchen, they will want to know, oh, brilliant, you put a heat pump in, fantastic, you've got PV panels, and as long as that it's been done correctly, which they can be assessed as part of a home purchase that anyone would do, then it's a good thing to have, and we do recognise that now.
Can you talk me through the structure of your team and how it's grown over time?
Yeah, so we've now got 11 people, which feels huge compared to where we started with. So it started with just 3 of us. We had a marketing lead and a technical lead. Our structure still is mirroring. We have a marketing head, we have a technical head, and we have a project head. And everything sits within those 3 fields. My role is to try to make the organization work as efficiently and effectively as possible, which means that I defer to their greater knowledge in those particular areas.
Conduct the orchestra.
Yeah, exactly. I absolutely doff my hat to them. They really know their stuff much more than I do. So, and that's the way it should be, really.
How do you see your focus changing? So you've had some time to kind of get the process dialed down to some degree. What does iterating Retrofit West look like?
So for us particularly, and this is a lesson that we've been learning over the year and a bit that we've been running, it's all about simplification. We need to make this very easy for consumers to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can make it easy for consumers to understand, we then make it easy for the supply chain to understand as a really possible, viable opportunity for earning money and delivering work. And our whole focus is to try and make that journey as simple and as normalized as possible. And that's what we're really focusing on now. As we've gone through that sort of learning stage within the first year, it's now moving into that transition of as to what we do. We've really understood that we need to be much closer to our customers than we first thought. We need to be their arm around the shoulder, the guide through this process, so they can be very comfortable about the decisions they make. And we want them to be able to phone us up and email us, go, I've got a doubt. That's fine. That's what we're here for. We're not here to make money out of you. We are here to provide that process and make it simple. So that's everything that we're about, simplification.
Simplification, at least in my experience, is a very complicated process.
Yeah.
Taking the mirror of film production for me, like getting something to look like it was a quick job is normally the longest and most complicated process there is. How does, I guess from a user experience design perspective on your part, how does simplifying the process look?
For us, it's about looking at it from the other end of the telescope. So I think when you're an organization, it's very easy for you to look at something and go, oh, this is very complicated. We need to ensure that the customer is aware of that complication because it really justifies us.
Yeah.
And what we do. And so they can be assured that all their queries are dealt with correctly. But if you look at it from the other end and then start to focus back into it, do consumers and homeowners really need to know that stuff? If we're running around like headless chickens behind the, like swans, doing all this work and making sure it work, they just need to know key points.
Yeah, you don't want to overwhelm them.
No, exactly. And that's what we're really focusing on now, is really understanding exactly what they need to see to be confident enough to be able to take a step, but not enough to overwhelm them. We can do all the heavy lifting for them. We can do that work. We just need to provide that trusted position where they can just take those steps to get the installs that they need.
I'm intrigued, given that a lot of tech companies have been on CleanTalk. How do you see the role of technology or apps and websites playing an increased role in Retrofit West?
It is something that we're developing at the moment, and it's absolutely learned behavior. Consumers expect to be able to do things online. They expect to see things and the process they go through in the right sort of way. So we're working very hard at the moment to provide a process that bridges the gap between those two things. It's not as simple as just putting everything online and people can then work their way through an app, because what we've experienced over the last year is that people really need that personal touch. So we're finding a way to develop a hybrid approach that provides people with the information and provides people with a processed journey through Retrofit, but at the same time having somebody that they can be their friend on this approach. And that's That's what we're doing. So it absolutely has the right role, but we need to combine it with the human touch as well.
Mm.
And that's where that's where we're developing our services at the moment to be able to achieve that. So a really good example of that is a recent partnership that we've established with an organization called HeatGeek. HeatGeek are the industry leaders for air source heat pump installs, and they have got a fantastic ecosystem of IT combined with very, very good assessment and installation providers who go through a very, very in-depth training to ensure and they can guarantee the performance of the install that a consumer would get. But the website approach and the digital is the first step for consumers. So we've partnered with them to reduce the cost of the design installation. A consumer would go onto our website, see the Retrofit West and HeatGeek website page. They can put in details of their home and they will get an estimate of how much the installation would cost and how much they would save. And that's based on really, really in-depth data that looks at average cost and energy use for houses typically of that size and age, how it will be used, the people that exist within it. And that allows then consumers to then make that choice. Now, because we're discounting the assessment, a homeowner can get an assessment for about 100 quid to get someone from HeatGeek will come out and they'll do some really, really detailed understanding of how their house performs, heat loss calculations, all wrapped up in a very slick ecosystem, and then give people a really solid quote. And they guarantee the performance of that install. And that is absolutely key for us because they're driving quality,
Yep.
not just volume. They are actively pushing people away because they want to ensure that they can provide a really, really good install.
Mm.
So homeowners can then make the choice, very informed choice, that what they're putting in will save them money. And then they can move on from there. So that's a really good example of how the IT interfaces then with the human touch and allows it to move forward.
Brilliant. Simon, we're going to wrap up with what we call Quickfire Curiosity, which is our short and personal, slightly philosophical set of trivia questions to end off with. First of which being, would you consider yourself a futurist?
I don't actually know what that means.
Everybody says it. It's fine. Have a go at scoping it out.
I think what you're asking me is, do I think about what's going to be happening down the road? And if that's what the definition of a futurist is, that is where I put myself. Generally, what keeps me interested in life. I like to strategize. I like to see the future. I like to to really think about it. And that's what kind of gets me motivated in the morning. So if that's what that is, then I'm one of them.
Fantastic. You're face to face with your younger self. You've gone through the education system and you find yourself ready to enter the working world or take on a new sort of level of work, if you will. You see that young man and you've got to give him some advice. What do you say? You've got 30 seconds.
Buy Bitcoin, invest in Google, and trust your gut.
That's great. I love that. For people considering a career in the renewable energy or clean technology or sustainability space that don't know what they should do, what questions would you encourage them to ask themselves? Have a bit of self-reflection to determine the course.
Have a real think about what gets you motivated. They've obviously decided to move into this sector because they are either seeing it as a potential growth industry and they can move into it for economic reasons, or they're passionate about saving the planet. But I think behind all of those motivations, you need to be asking yourself, what gets you up in the morning? What keeps you interested and what keeps you engaged, whatever that is? It's a very pertinent question because my son at the moment is trying to choose his A-levels, just coming to the end of his GCSEs. So we're having real conversations about interest and what keeps you going. And I think those questions, it doesn't stop when you leave education. It doesn't stop when you're choosing your job. I think as humans, we need something more to get us going. And so I think that's a really good question just to ask on a regular basis because we change, right, as we go through life. What's sparking my interest now? Because it won't be what sparked your interest 5-10 years ago, and that's fine. You know, if there is one constant, it is change.
Love it. What's been your most unexpected learning of your career in the renewable energy space and sustainability space that shaped your view of the world on a more existential level?
There are so many doubters out there. You know, we all, everyone knows that there are people who doubt this stuff. But until I was actually in it, I didn't realize quite how many there are. Yes, there's a lot of passionate people that really want to do this, but there are thousands of people that think the earth is flat and that climate change isn't a thing. So, that's been my biggest surprise.
Simon, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I'm really excited to follow Retrofit West as you continue to impact the local community. And I have no doubt we'll be back in Bristol for another episode soon. So I'll see you soon.
I hope so.
Thank you for your time.